Technologies cannot erase the unpredictability of rogue waves or the inevitability of multi-week stress loads on hulls. Insurers, therefore, continue to treat every vessel as carrying elevated exposure, even if it sails with cutting-edge equipment. When companies compare invoices, the imbalance stands out. A Suez passage may draw heavy war risk fees during flare-ups, but sees those rates subside once political crises pause. A Cape passage, however, never resets. The baseline premium is fixed to geography and waves. For decision-makers, this imbalance explains why fleets often idle and wait for northern waters to calm rather than divert south immediately. Waiting out danger is frequently cheaper than absorbing guaranteed Cape surcharges. The effect is cumulative. The more voyages detour south, the more evidence accumulates of damaged hulls, lost cargo, or delayed rescues, and the more resolute insurers become in maintaining high rates. Operators bear costs from both sides, paying more in premiums and absorbing reputational harm when incidents confirm the underlying risk tables. This creates a reinforcing loop where danger inflates premiums, premiums discourage traffic, and reduced traffic concentrates further risk on the ships that dare the passage. In broad perspective, the Cape has become less a maritime problem than a financial one. It is not only the pounding surf that dissuades operators, but the invisible markups written in underwriting offices thousands of miles away. Insurers do not sink vessels, but they can make voyages uneconomical before they even begin. That hidden, intangible layer levies a cost just as severe as any storm at sea. It is why captains and accountants alike recoil at the choice, recognizing that expense shadows them from the first chart plotted. And while these premiums already weigh heavily, what lies ahead threatens to magnify them further. Weather itself is shifting, with storm systems growing stronger and less predictable along Africa's southern oceans. For underwriters, this means higher odds of claims. For ship owners, even steeper fees. The environment that produced today's premiums is not standing still. It is entering a phase where the barriers may rise higher than ever. When climate change makes the Cape worse. In the mid-2020, another force began reshaping conditions at the Cape, a force far larger than insurance markets or individual storms. Climate change has started to alter the patterns that crews and planners once relied upon. Researchers studying southern Africa's oceans point to a consistent trend. Warmer sea surface temperatures and shifting wind currents are fueling stronger, less predictable weather in the waters where the Atlantic and Indian Oceans meet. It is here, at this geographic collision zone, that even modest shifts in climate manifest as major hazards for shipping. Oceanographers have long described how warmer seas hold more energy. Higher temperatures allow the ocean to retain more moisture, setting the stage for heavier rainfall and stronger storm systems. The World Meteorological Organization has warned that these factors also intensify storm surges, especially when combined with global sea level rise. At the Cape of Good Hope, these changes combine with local geography. The powerful Agulha's current flowing from the Indian Ocean collides with colder Atlantic flows, and when warmer waters fuel that interaction, the outcome can be violent waves and erratic winds. This is less about abstract climate models and more about on-the-ground impacts observed by mariners and supported by regional data. Ship reports illustrate the change clearly. Mariners in 2025 describe encountering waves exceeding 14 meters in height more frequently than in prior decades. While monster waves have always been a feature of the Cape, records suggest their average heights and intensity are increasing. What once appeared as rare, one-off rogue waves now emerge in longer, more punishing clusters. The challenge for crews is not riding out a single crest, but absorbing wave after wave at ship-breaking scale. Storm cycles, once confined largely to May through September, now seem to arrive outside traditional seasonal windows. Tracking data confirms that unusual surges have spiked in months previously viewed as relatively safe. Attribution studies lend weight to these experiences without overstating certainty. World Weather Attribution and similar groups have highlighted that warmer oceans in the South Indian Ocean basin have increased the intensity of extreme rainfall and storm events across parts of southern Africa. Though they note variability remains and some uncertainties are high, the data points to a future with greater risk in regions like the Cape, where competing currents already prime conditions for volatility. Climate scientists explain that even small increases in ocean heat expand the likelihood of severe outcomes, and the Cape is precisely where those amplified dynamics hit ships head-on. The physics translate into everyday costs for operators. A higher mean sea level increases the base upon which waves build, making storm surges stronger and more destructive against ship hulls. Engineers reinforce container lashings, yet 2025 industry reporting documented stacks collapsing under pressure that existing standards should have survived. The damage does not always sink ships, but bent fittings, twisted decks, or partial cargo loss translate into insurance claims, repair delays, and lost contracts. In an industry predicated on tight turnaround times, these disruptions ripple through entire supply chains. The notion that global warming might create new maritime opportunities, such as an ice-free Arctic opening to trade, does not apply here. For southern Africa, the inverse is true. Warming seas intensify hazard rather than relieve it. Ships venturing through the Cape struggle with amplified wave energy, unpredictable storm tracks, and a blurring of seasonal distinctions. This reality undermines older arguments that Africa's southern passage could serve as a reliable alternative should other routes falter. Instead, the Cape grows less predictable every year, reinforcing its reputation as the world's least dependable detour. Crew testimonies confirm the human scale of these changes. Logs from diverted voyages in 2025 note near misses where severe shifts tossed containers into the ocean despite reinforced bindings. Masters recount losing satellite connections in violent squalls, forcing reliance on outdated backup instruments as conditions worsened within hours. Anchoring for shelter is little help, since sudden surges can drive ships toward hazardous coastlines, narrowing already thin margins for safety. Technology provides forecasts, but sailors report that warnings often arrive too late or underestimate the speed of deterioration. For those on deck, storms shaped by warming seas are less a statistical model than a lived threat. For operators, climate uncertainty forces hard trade-offs. Continue using the Cape, and a company must accept higher insurance rates, greater odds of equipment damage, and mounting repair costs. Avoid it, and fleets are funneled through limited passages such as Suez, where geopolitical instability creates its own risks. The fundamental challenge is that climate change multiplies vulnerability across every corridor. Nowhere is that more evident than at the Cape, where traders already contended with high winds and hostile seas long before today's climate shifts deepened the dangers. What once was a seasonal hazard is now a year-round operating problem. Records from decades past identified May through September as the peak hazard window, but in 2025, serious storms increasingly struck in historically calmer months. This complicates the calendars both insurers and fleet managers rely on. Premiums once varied by season, but if violent seas strike in October or February as often as in July, then predictable models collapse. Operators no longer plan only for seasonal surges. They prepare for disruption at any time of year. That erosion of predictability removes the small flexibility companies once used to balance costs and scheduling. The global shipping map reflects these imbalances. Northern passages such as the Arctic attract fresh interest as summer ice retreats, offering shorter voyages during fair seasons. Yet at the same time, the Cape declines further as an option precisely because warming intensifies its existing hazards. The asymmetry illustrates the uneven nature of climate change. New doors may open in one hemisphere, while others close more firmly elsewhere. For the Cape of Good Hope, warming is not opportunity, it is a magnifier of risk. Some responses on the technical side aim to counter the problem. Naval architects refine hulls with resilient steels, fit ships with larger stabilizers, and integrate sensors designed to detect structural stress in real time. These innovations do improve survival odds and reduce the scale of some damages, but they can only manage consequences, not prevent causes. They cannot halt the formation of stronger swells or redirect shifting pressure systems. Climate change operates on a scale larger than what individual ships or even entire fleets can engineer around. Company executives acknowledge as much, noting that technology buys time but rarely restores profitability in waters as volatile as these. Analysts sometimes propose that the Cape could still serve as an emergency corridor, one to use only when shorter routes become impassable. Yet climate models projecting further ocean warming warn that conditions will worsen, not ease, in coming decades. Forecasts expect not only higher maximum wave heights, but also more unpredictable storm tracks and stronger surges fueled by rising seas. This ensures that any fallback role the Cape occupies will be even costlier and more perilous than it already is today. Maritime safety assessments from 2025 framed the region less as an emergency option than as a last resort threshold that companies enter reluctantly, knowing the risks to profit and life are significant. Seen from this perspective, descriptions of waves rising above 4 stories are less sensational than they might sound. They capture a repeating trend, not an exception. Climate factors already amplify the same geographic collision that has defined the Cape since sailing records began. Centuries ago, legends like the Flying Dutchman put a face to its mystery. Now, climate data underlines the same point in more clinical but equally ominous detail. This corner of the ocean resists predictability. That resistance shapes not only folklore, but also 21st century logistics and insurance. The key issue is that climate change compounds, rather than relieves, the Cape's long-standing dangers. Every uptick in ocean heat injects more volatility into storm cycles, raising the barriers for ships already struggling with cost, distance, and unpredictability. Neither reinforced designs nor advanced monitoring systems erase those fundamentals. The Cape of Good Hope remains a proving ground for human endurance, made harsher by the accumulated shifts of a warming planet. And the critical question now turns to the measures shipping companies place their faith in. If the seas themselves grow harsher, can new materials, AI-driven weather models, and reinforced hulls truly tip the balance for fleets attempting the passage? Or do even the newest ships face limits in waters shaped by forces far greater than engineering can solve? High-tech ships versus unforgiving seas. The latest generation of cargo vessels arrives equipped with technology that would have been unthinkable a few decades ago. Control systems now synthesize live feeds from satellites, display storm projections in real time, and even suggest course adjustments before a front builds on the horizon. Hulls are forged from advanced steel alloys designed to flex under stress instead of fracturing. Stabilizer's moderate role in bad weather, and AI-driven routing software runs quietly in the background, pulling data from ocean buoys and orbital sensors alike. On paper, these ships should handle nearly anything the oceans present. Yet in the waters south of Africa, those expectations keep colliding with a brutal reality: storms and seas that overwhelm even the best hardware. Technology thrives where patterns can be recognized. Automated docking reduces accidents in predictable port settings, and navigation software cuts costs across calm, steady routes by trimming fuel consumption. But the Cape does not operate in patterns. Instead, 2 massive ocean systems, the cold Benguela current from the Atlantic and the warm Agulhas from the Indian Ocean, clash unpredictably. Pressure systems shift quickly, winds drive swells from multiple angles, and cross seas form in minutes. Predictive models improve awareness of this instability, but cannot forecast exactly when or where a sudden sea state change will occur. For captains, the result is not clear instructions for evasion, but bundles of warnings advising that danger is likely everywhere. Compressed into real voyages, the failure of predictability becomes obvious. A container ship south of Cape Town in 2024, fitted with modern stabilizers and reinforced lashings, still lost stacks of containers during a rogue wave sequence. The systems did not malfunction. They absorbed and responded, but the wave patterns came from too many directions at once, producing forces outside their design tolerances. Offshore engineers later pointed to parametric rolling, a destabilizing condition triggered when successive swells match a ship's natural frequency of motion, as the culprit. No computer model predicted it at the critical moment. For insurers tallying the damage, the presence of advanced technology mattered little. The losses still ran into the millions. Broader evidence matches these single stories. The World Shipping Council recorded a jump in container losses during 2024-25, especially among vessels pushed onto longer southern routes by Red Sea conflicts. Operators pointed out that most of these ships sailed with state-of-the-art cargo securing systems, yet the Cape's conditions regularly overran those protections. A hull reinforced for the North Atlantic might withstand severe swells for days without issue, but repeated stress events under Africa accumulate in ways the models do not yet predict well. By the time an exhausted crew steers into calmer seas, cracks may already be running below the waterline. This gap between design and reality makes the Cape uniquely resistant to technological progress. Whether routing algorithms prove their worth elsewhere, a tanker in the Pacific can shave days from a voyage by steering clear of a cyclone projected 3 to 4 days in advance. At the Cape, models generate dense clusters of uncertainty markers covering hundreds of nautical miles, effectively telling crews that hardship cannot be avoided. What technology creates, then, is awareness, not escape routes. Automated dashboards light up with alerts and probability scores, but they rarely transform into actions that prevent ships from being caught in the thick of a storm. Crew testimonies from these voyages reflect the frustration. Officers describe bridges filled with precise data that confirm conditions are worsening, yet offer no feasible path out. Warning after warning mirrors what their senses already detect: winds rising, seas chopping from multiple sides, containers groaning against lashings. Far from reassuring, the flood of inputs can exacerbate stress. Sailors remark that 21st century dashboards make them more conscious of just how far outside safe margins they are drifting, without providing practical remedies. Instead of reducing tension, the illusion of control amplifies anxiety while the ship continues to pitch and roll. To be clear, these high-tech systems do achieve results in reducing the most catastrophic outcomes. Fewer ships sink outright, and casualties are lower compared to past centuries when wooden hulls faced the same waters. Autonomous monitoring has saved crews by giving them precious minutes to secure decks before major surges. Reinforced alloys bend instead of splintering, meaning vessels limp back to port instead of vanishing beneath the waves. But profitability relies on more than survival. A ship that survives with fractured plates, collapsed container stacks, and weeks lost in the repair yard leaves charterers just as unsatisfied as one that never arrived. Safety gains ease human risk, but they do not erase the financial imbalance. Industry analysts note how this difference shapes strategic choices. Operators cannot overlook advanced safety systems because they perform well across most oceans. However, when plotting long-haul routes between Asia and Europe, those same executives acknowledge technology does little to justify detouring south. The passage demands extra time, guarantees extra fuel burn, and still carries higher odds of damage. Autonomous routing and predictive weather software are now industry standard, but they do not change the fundamental equation. Cape voyages remain more expensive and more uncertain. Practical comparisons hammer this point home. In calmer seas, improved stabilizers and optimized hull geometries turn into measurable gains. Insurance fees dip, damages decline, and voyages accelerate. At the Cape, identical designs still produce reports of cracked welds and cargo toppled into the ocean. Every published case confirms a simple theme: tools that excel in stable systems function poorly in volatile ones. Engineers can reinforce hulls and equip sophisticated monitoring, but no amount of tuning removes the shocks produced when competing waves converge in chaotic bursts. Accident records reinforce the unease. Casualty totals are lower than in earlier centuries, but incident rates at the Cape still exceed those on nearly all other established global routes. When damage claims are tallied, regional routing consistently carries a larger share. The advances that once promised conquest of the world's oceans now reveal their boundaries. Technology closes gaps almost everywhere else, but here it finds its sharpest limit. From the perspective of shipowners, this knowledge feels like a paradox. They spend millions on upgrades and digital systems, watch safety metrics improve globally, and then confront a single corridor where the return on those investments collapses. Operators describe the Cape as a natural test site where reality strips away illusions. Naval architects can show improved stress tests in laboratories. Software vendors can market clever forecasts. But when gale-driven seas throw parametric rolls across a 400-meter container ship, the limits of design and prediction come into stark relief. For the maritime economy, the outcome is predictable. The Cape remains an emergency detour, a corridor embraced only when other doors are slammed shut. Progress has shrunk dangers worldwide, but here it merely prepares ships to endure, not thrive. Awareness has become the prize, not avoidance. And as insurers price voyages accordingly, companies still weigh the route as a cost trap rather than a competitive choice. Technology has blunted some of the Cape's sharpest edges, but left its essence intact. Volatility that refuses to be smoothed into models. From rogue waves to rolling stress, forces continue to outpace the reach of algorithms and alloys. And while these hazards dominate discussions of weather and engineering, the seas south of Africa conceal another factor shaped not by storms, but by human threat, a risk that lingers alongside nature and complicates every decision about whether to pass that way. Piracy still casts a shadow. Piracy in 2025 remains an unrelenting factor in route planning, even if it no longer dominates front-page headlines. While missiles in the Red Sea or surging storms at the Cape draw more global attention, the threat of armed boarding still shapes decisions in boardrooms and on bridge decks. Operators must calculate not only the costs of distance and weather, but the possibility of armed men in skiffs attempting to climb their hulls. The persistence of this problem highlights a reality that has changed little in decades. While cutting-edge technology defends against storms, human threats remain stubbornly difficult to eradicate. After nearly a decade of relative calm, Somali piracy showed signs of resurgence in 2023 and 2024. International naval patrols that once blunted the threat scaled back as funding and priorities shifted elsewhere. Small groups reorganized, reviving the same tactics that once terrorized merchant shipping. Reports documented renewed attacks against slower bulk carriers and tankers straying even modest distances off convoy routes. Assaults often began with volleys of small arms fire, sometimes backed by rocket-propelled grenades intended to intimidate crews into surrendering.